Hello there. My name is Don Ledingham. I'm the founder of Ceannas. Ceannas is a global leadership development company. The name actually means leadership in Scots Gaelic. And we operate across the world now, working with some of the world's top companies. And we've been in existence for the last 10 years. Now, my own background is in education. I was a teacher, university lecturer, a secondary school head teacher, and finally a director of education. But running parallel to that career was my passion in leadership development. It really stems back to really about the early 90s, where I was seeing people going off to do leadership development training, and they were coming back. They were able to quote chapters from books, but when I looked at their behaviour, nothing was changing. And it was with that in mind I set out to try and develop an alternative model, which we've now put in practice in Ceannas over the last 10 years and now worked with about 8,000 leaders, primarily in the commercial sector. But over the last 2 years, we wanted to try and take that success and bring it into the world of public service, which is one of our key drivers within the organisation, but subsidised, heavily subsidised by our work in the commercial sector. Which takes us to the Evolve Accredited Partner Schools programme, which I'm going to try and describe to you as I go through these various slides. Now, just to let you know, I'm not going to dig into every slide in a huge amount of detail, but you'll be able to go through the presentation and pick up on some of the detail yourself. But again, we're very happy to follow up on any queries you may have. So, what is the Evolve programme? Well, in a basic sense, this is geared towards you as a middle leader, and we recognise how precious your time is. But we've taken our 6-day, 42-hour programme and we've squeezed it down into 10 2-hour sessions. And these will be delivered internally by people who you know and trust within your school and understand your context. We're going to provide them with the training. And the last point is, I would describe it as very self-contained. This isn't the kind of training or learning experience that's going to require you to go and do additional research and study. It's going to really focus in on your behaviour. So if we pick up on the objectives of the programme, we're hoping that up to 10 people within your school will participate. And it's this sense of connected purpose that's going to be really important to drive that forwards. The second point is creating a dynamic learning environment where you can grow into becoming a great leader. And finally, if I pick up on number 5 here, we want to extend you far beyond what you thought yourself capable of as a leader. And certainly those who have participated in previous programmes would attest to that fact. So a little bit about the Ceannas proposition. As I've already mentioned, I'm primarily interested in behaviour. We believe that if behaviour doesn't change, then nothing changes. So what we want to do is to try and help you to identify where are the changes in your own leadership behaviour that's going to give you the greatest impact. And the way that we do that is through our analytics, which we call ways of looking, and ways of thinking, which we relate to wise decision making. And these two elements will help you to shift and nudge the ways in which you behave as a leader that ultimately are going to impact upon creating a high performance culture within your school. So what's different between what we call this the Ceannas curve and leadership training? What we're trying to do is to establish an exponential platform for you that will go on far beyond this 20-hour programme. Whereas a training programme, 10 people in a room all learn the same thing. We're interested that 10 people in the room, each person identifies their own personal change strategy that's unique to them. And in that sense, it's very, very different from a traditional training program that everybody will learn the same thing. And then eventually that will decay towards the end, as demonstrated by the red line. So we're not a training company. It isn't about training. It's essentially about enabling you to transform and shift the way in which you behave. Now, this links to the question about why bother. And I've already mentioned, we believe that leadership behaviour needs to shape culture. Culture are the expectations, the values, the beliefs, the attitudes, and ultimately the behaviours. And the culture shapes organisational behaviour, and the organisational behaviour delivers performance. And ultimately, as a leader, that's what we should be looking to do. That's the difference between management and leadership. So what we're going to do, and we're borrowing here from a strong educational concept, this notion of scaffolding. We want to provide you with a scaffolding that's going to allow you to shift your own leadership, that's going to have an impact upon culture, that in turn is going to impact organisational behaviour, and finally is going to deliver high performance within the school. And that relates to our belief that great leadership equals great culture, equals great performance. And what we're going to try and do, this scaffolding is going to relate to behaviour, it's going to relate to culture, and it's going to relate to decision making. So let me just introduce you to these three brief frameworks. So this is what we call the Ceannas lenses. Now this has been, I first started developing this back in 1995. It's been used by over 8,000 leaders successfully around the world. And you may at first glance say, well, I've done something like this. This is a psychometric test that's going to tell me what I am and who other people are. It's not. This is a framework that allows you to think about different behaviours and looking through different lenses to decide which lens is the most appropriate form of behaviour to address particular challenges that you might have in your own environment. So, for example, I might want to step into that conductor role. If we think of the orchestra, I need to be up front. I perhaps do need to drive and direct. Now, my personality might not necessarily push me towards that, but I recognise there's an obligation for me to step up into that role. But I might just as easily decide, actually, I need to step back from that conductor role. So it's this idea of being able to step forwards, step back, or open or close a lens as we describe it. Let me pick another couple of lenses to describe this a little bit more. So the parent lens, we can think of a leader who is very comfortable in that parent lens. They're protective, they support, they forgive, they wrap their arms around people, but actually they smother people. And again, we can think of leaders who actually have stepped back from being a parent and the powerful impact that that's had. And let me just pick one more of those lenses, the scientist lens. Perhaps as a leader, you're not inclined towards the data, the numbers, the evidence, but actually you recognise, here's a gap. I can use this knowledge to perhaps really drive performance more strongly. And that's where I can start to think about opening and closing different lenses. And this becomes a really powerful framework for people to frame the kind of leader they are at the moment, but also to describe what kind of leader they want to become in the future. So that's our first framework, the Ceannas lenses. The second framework is round about culture. And here we use the notion of the culture footprint, which is something similar to the carbon footprint. And if we think of your carbon footprint, we know that it's made up of perhaps the fuel that we use to drive our car. Is it electric? Is it petrol? How do we insulate our house? How do we dispose of our waste? Once we understand the makeup of our carbon footprint, we can make changes. So we've used that similar concept and created what the 7 building blocks of your culture footprint. And the culture footprint is made up of those 7 dimensions. So we've got leadership and management, entrepreneurship and learning. And entrepreneurship is that notion of innovation and creativity. Now, you might find that's an interesting term in terms of education. That's not what we're about. We're not about creating products or profit, but it's that entrepreneurial mindset to push beyond the status quo and linking that with learning, that capacity, that learning mindset, that willingness to change and shift and to push our own behaviour forwards. Warmth and edge I'm going to describe just in a moment, but these have become very, very powerful concepts for us in terms of identifying what a culture is. And the final building block is teamwork. And what we're able to do by using these building blocks is to identify where are potentially the gaps in the culture that you lead, and how might you need to push forward the culture of your own organisation, and how might you go about that. And this is the framework that we use to enable you to do that. Now, I've mentioned about warmth and edge, and this has become a really powerful dimension here. And rather than thinking of warmth versus edge, so warmth is the extent to which you care for, support, and nurture people, and edge is this focus on performance, success, and results. Now, we believe that great leaders are able to operate with high warmth and high edge. Now, if you think for a moment of the best teachers that you know, I'll guarantee you that they are able to deliver successful learning in an environment which demonstrates high warmth and high edge. And if we go to the left-hand side of that line, the orange, and we think of an organisation where perhaps we've got low edge and high warmth, in other words, we're happy and ineffective. So an organisation there might, how do they manage to maintain that high warmth, but perhaps introduce the idea of edge? And we look at the other two quadrants here, very interesting, the notion of low edge and low warmth, the really serious impact that has upon the culture of an organisation, or high edge and low warmth, where people become stressed and fearful. So again, we'll use this framework to help you to identify where you are, but also where your organisation, where perhaps your department or where your school lies, and how you want to move that forwards. And finally, in terms of the frameworks that we're going to be using, we're going to talk about wise decision making. And for us, wise decision making is doing the right thing at the right time for the right reasons. And you'll see at the beginning of that, and if I take you to that yellow segment, it starts with self-awareness. Who are you as a leader? It's understanding that. And then we're moving on to seeing alternative perspectives, enabling others. I'm not going to go into the detail of this, but it allows you to start to think about making decision making. How do you make decisions? How do you delegate responsibility to others? How do you make challenging and courageous decisions? And we've had fantastic results with leaders using the wheel of wise decision making. So a little bit more about the programme, the Evolve Accreditation Programme. We're going to train a nominated leader from your school, and we're going to provide them with all of the information that they require to be able to deliver this programme successfully to you. And we in turn believe that with 10 of your colleagues participating in that, well, that will go on to have a significant impact upon the culture of the school. So the challenge, why accreditation? Well, as I say, we've worked with some of the world's top organisations such as Google Cloud, Allianz Insurance, some of the largest, most commercially successful businesses in the world. And obviously, we can't provide a similar service within schools. And that's where we believe that by accrediting people to deliver this programme internally, it will open up an opportunity that would otherwise be unavailable within the public sector. And the impact of this is, I've already mentioned, this team dynamic, your self-awareness, but ultimately it's about unlocking school performance. So the programme itself, as I say, we'll be training the accredited partner, and there will be 10 sessions running over the course of the year, and these will be identified within your own school. Some of these sessions could be brought together in over the delivery of half a day. You'll also have access to our technology, our app, which proves to be a very successful supporting tool for participants, and finally access to all of the analytics that go alongside the programme. The accreditation process will be starting the end of August 2025, where we'll be working with leaders from 20 schools and training them, and over the course of that process we'll be supporting them through webinars, full-day sessions in Edinburgh, and ongoing support to enable them to deliver this programme in the best manner that they can to you. As we run through the year, we're going to conclude with a final conference on a Saturday morning that you'll be most welcome to attend if you so wish. But again, we'll be pulling together an evaluation report to judge the success of the overall programme. The 10 sessions, now I'm not going to go into these in detail, but I'll drop into a few just to give you a hint. But I'll bring these up on the screen and you can have a look at these in a little bit more detail in your own time. But we begin by really focusing on this notion of self-awareness. We kick off with the idea of hinterland, and these are the ideas of what your early experiences were as a young person and how they've affected your leadership behaviour. And we'll pull that forwards to really enable you to build that really strong sense of who you are as a leader at this moment in time. The second session will take you into the Ceannas lenses, really start to look at where your default behaviours lie. And if I take you to that second box, which is one of our key principles, we don't believe that leadership behaviour isn't fixed. And that's been reinforced time and time again by working with really successful leaders and helping them to shift and push beyond into behaviours that they didn't think they were capable of. Session 3, we start to really pick up into this concept of delegation, and your own personal vision and mission. But if I take you into that third box, this concept of disciplined initiative, how do you create an environment where you can really delegate successfully to other people? Because we find that this is one of the major challenges for managers moving on to become leaders. So we're really going to focus in on that delegation role. We'll take you further into the Ceannas scaffolding by starting to look at culture, how you can impact culture, how you can think about culture, and again, how might you modify your own behaviours to have an even greater impact upon the culture within your own school. Session 5 will dig more into warmth and edge. Where do you lie in that spectrum that we looked at? How might you need to shift? And we will dig more into the parent lens and the scientist lens, particularly into relation to that. Session 6 starts to take us into leadership and management. How do we shift from being a successful manager into being a successful leader? How do we apply those two elements together? And starting to think about what changes do you need to be making in that regard. Session 7 takes us into entrepreneurship, particularly this notion of pushing beyond the status quo. Not necessarily coming up with massively innovative ideas, but just managing change and pushing this through towards becoming and creating a learning organisation. Session 8 builds on teamwork, the villager lens particularly, but shifting from this idea of teams rather than just being groups, this notion of real synergy where we are able to contribute towards the effectiveness of our colleagues. Session 9 really starts to pull the whole idea of wise leadership together, bringing some real life examples together, helping you to make sense of complexity. And then this really powerful block that we look at where we start to look at shifting from choice to obligation, which is a really liberating part of the programme. And finally, the final session will pick up on what's your personal change strategy. And you will be able to use all of the scaffolding that we've provided you up to this point to identify your own personal change strategy, the shifts that you're going to be making, why those shifts are going to be important, how you're going to do it, and then being able to articulate to the other participants within the programme. There's the final few slides here give a little bit of feedback from our pilot programme that we ran successfully in 2024 in New Zealand. We wanted to test the impact of accrediting a leader from 12,500 miles away to actually deliver this programme within their school. Delighted that Christine Layton, the rector of St Andrew's College in Christchurch, ran this programme and ran it incredibly successfully. And I'll allow you just to read the feedback on that programme. The feedback from the participants was equally powerful across the group. It was scored 9.3 out of 10 in terms of highlighting the programme's effectiveness and value. And again, I'll allow you to read their own individual feedback. The Evolve platform and app, and this can be downloadable, you can download it now, in fact, on the App Store or on the Google platform, and actually start to look at, I would direct you towards a leadership compass, which starts to use some of our frameworks to support the learning process. So why the Evolve platform? Again, we don't necessarily want people to be doing a lot of reading beyond the programme, but as you're starting to think about how might I be able to apply that, the Evolve app again starts to help us in terms of being able to address some of those challenges as you move forwards. This slide takes you into some of the frequently asked questions that we've had. Again, you can pick up on some of those. But there's a fundamental question in here about the fee. So why are we charging a fee? The fee of £500 per school, we believe demonstrates a commitment towards the programme. And if this was a commercial fee, if we were challenging this in a commercial fee, it would be somewhere between £6,000 to £8,000 per organisation. So the question is, why so cheap? Well, our mission as an organisation is to have an impact upon leaders, an impact upon organisations, and an impact on society and the wider community in which we live. And we cannot do that if we only operate within the commercial sector. And that's why we believe that by taking this programme into the public sector, demonstrating its impact, we can start to really fulfil that dimension of our programme. So That takes us to this end of this short presentation. I hope it will have given you an inkling of what the programme is going to be about. I'm really excited about meeting people in the coming months and finding out how you're getting on. And hopefully, if you go all the way through the programme, joining us in our conference towards the end of next session, where we'll be able to share our experiences. Thank you very much for joining me.